does.
You mentioned something about like government intervention, and I think that I don't know if my government is doing. I know that there are currently conversations going on, but also I think this is one way to say, okay, this is. I know there was a rule at some point to ensure that we had local content back home, more local content than internet, and that has immensely paid off in the benefit of the artists. Is there anything like that here? Is there stuff that has been done here that the government has said? Like you mentioned, the president signed, an order or a document. I think we're too used to President Trump with his executive orders, but he signed the document.
He commissioned the report.
Report to help ensure that these things were properly designated to different people. Outside that, are there like I said, local content and international content? Is it something that is done here as well? Like, does the government insist that it must be like this, and what percentage?
That's a very politically charged question in our environment right now.
Yeah.
So the long and short of it though is they are. But unlike maybe in Nigeria, our quotas are very different because also South Africa is it's a very weirdly structured country, particularly where economics are concerned, right? So at the moment, we have a few, actually not a few, we have some content quotas that dictate certain percentage. I think it's 40% on a commercial radio station, 60%
40% of what?
Of local content, 60 on a community, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, but no one is happy with those.
Okay.
Not a single one of the localized structures is happy with those, because there's an understanding that when you play music, when you export music, you're exporting culture, and there's a huge element that has to do with culture that you consume. Part of the reason why across the continent we have kids with American accents is because we consume American culture.
Yeah.
It's easier for someone like me and yourself to say, man, these kids with their fake accents, but chances are accents are learned.
Yeah.
Right? Like you get socialized into structuring your tongue in a particular way when you pronounce certain words, and they get socialized through all the TV they watch, all the music they listen to, and they end up speaking that way, and they just learn to do so.
Yeah.
And it becomes their default, and that's the power and the very real illustration of how culture is exported.
Yeah.
So currently there's a debate. Last year, or was it the year before, there was a call, or at least there was a policy implemented that all the government radio station, at least the public broadcasting stations, would have a 90% local quota implemented. And there was a few of those stations that had a problem with meeting that quota, but there were others that took it upon their stride and ran with it, right?
Okay. So that was because of the amount of content, or?
No, it's for me at least, from my assessment of the situation, it was varying factors that caused all of that.
Okay.
One of the main things is radio hardly changes. Like radio has specific formats.
Yeah. And
some formats are not necessarily music that we make.
Fair enough.
Or at least we make a lot of.
Okay.
So there'd be those that struggle to meet those particular types of quotas because their format is so weird that format favors international content more than it does local. And then also you have an issue where for us it was compounded by the fact that there's a very weird way in which music submission is done into the radio station.
Okay.
It's not the most smooth or the most transparent way in which it can be done. And what that does, it causes a bottleneck. Compound that with payola, and then suddenly you get a very minute number of new entrants into the market all the time. Okay. So when they implemented the 90-10 rule, one of the biggest problems was there was no prep done to ensure that you open the floodgates of all these others so that you can send all these songs that were bottlenecked in the committee needs to meet next week. But if it's a committee of 6 people, there's submissions of about 300 songs. They can only ever get through 50 maybe. So there'll always be a bottleneck. So you get that issue, and then you get the Payola issue, and then you get the fact that it was implemented haphazardly, so people weren't prepared. So what happened is people started playing old songs that were already on the system.
Okay.
So there were no new entrants into the market, which is not what the quotas were supposed to do. And then you compound that with the fact that we, the creative community, also don't necessarily do compilers a big favor when we submit. We don't look at the format of the radio station, we just submit. That's the problem. Sometimes you submit music that's not radio friendly. Sometimes you submit a 7-minute song. Which radio station is going to play a 7-minute song?
Yeah.
Like, keep it 3.5.
Yeah.
So they have basic guidelines that we don't follow when submitting. So all of these issues are why I feel the 90-10 thing didn't fail. It's not one particular aspect. It's all these in one. So there's a call now to try and review all of those quotas. So, and particularly looking at Zimbabwe, looking at Nigeria, there's huge success cases that come with having a lot of local music being played. One of the most easier one is the money stays within the economy. So that's standard. If all of the music played in a particular radio station is of local music, when the CMOs distribute, they distribute to no one else but locals. And this is one of the biggest problems we currently have in the country, in that people see the CMO distribution as the problem rather than the symptom. CMOs are paying too much money to foreign internationals. CMOs are mere conduits of payment. The problem is right there at the playlisting. If you want to fix that, leave CMOs as they are, fix the playlisting problem, and then suddenly CMOs, through the very same existing rules without changing anything, start paying more to the localized community. So it's easier to do that without necessarily trying to basically blame CMOs for a problem they can't solve. So you have that issue, and we do have the quotas that very contentious. But I think all in all, everybody understands that there is some value that comes with prioritizing culture. It's even allowed in international treaties as a cultural exception, because people understand that the cultural economies require that. And particularly if you look at the two most dominant nations that export culture, being the US and the UK, they have a lot more money to bombard you with their culture. They have a lot more money. Even you find institutes like the Groote Institute or the French Institute all over the place. Those are countries that realize that they need to sell their culture out there, and they have the money to do so. So unless you protect your own, you might just get overwhelmed. And then, so there is a need to protect it, but now the trick is to protect it in a way that also allows for global exchange. And that's the trick.
I was gonna ask that, but even in exchanging culture, right? Because there's nothing we can do about it, right? Most of the things we see now is not just radio, it's not just TV, it's online.
It's on the internet,
right? But now this brings me to the next conversation, which is about how we, as Africans, are sometimes not necessarily helping in promoting our culture and in promoting our own systems, right? It's going to take time for certain things locally to work, but instead of actively ensuring that those responsible, I have people from the two different factions of Kosan reach out to me to say, speak up, say something, but I always feel like whatever I would say would be biased because I haven't really heard from both sides, and I have reached out to both sides, and I'm hoping that after this, I'll get a chance to also talk to them individually and be able to tell their own side of the story. But I feel like because certain things don't work, the average African's immediate response to that is to go out, right? And I also feel like what that does to Africa is we consistently take the power. If our biggest people allow and take everything and say, okay, my people can't solve a problem, so I'm just gonna go to these guys, right? And I'm gonna go talk to these guys because they have the structure, they have the system, but we're never gonna end up building ours. So I'm sitting here and I'm from Nigeria. I'm coming to South Africa and I'm like, okay, South Africans are telling me things aren't working the way we want. I'm like, things are working pretty good, right? So I'm now wondering, okay, so what are those things, which is why this whole conversation started. What are those things that I can start asking my people, like, how can we fix this? So we've talked about the CMO conversation. I want to go back and talk to MCSN and COSON and say, why can't we figure out a way to ensure that we can make this work? So that the big artists we have don't, for instance, I'll be very honest with you, because another thing I wanted to mention was the publishing houses, right? I'm looking for publishing houses here because I know that there's a lot of money generated here for some of my clients, and I want someone to collect it, right? I want to trust COSON to collect it on my behalf, right? But you see, I have to deal with the fact that there are challenges now, and if those challenges continue to happen, we're going to have a big problem. So I want to talk to a publishing company, a global publishing company, to say, okay, you look, collect on behalf of my clients globally, right? From the different collecting societies, collect on my behalf globally. But what I really want is for COSON to work.
Yeah.
Because that's in the interest of our economy. You know, so especially with the way the quota is and there's more Nigerian music, it becomes easier for them to do what they need to do. And if COSON starts working and we stop having these arguments, because I mean, if it is asking for an audit, that means we're making money, right? So we need to ask a lot more questions about how are we managing this money, which is a good thing. But as a system, it needs to work well so that organizations in countries like South Africa, where I've been here about a week now, and I've been to 4 clubs. It's not like I enjoy going clubbing. But I've been to 4 clubs.
That's for moms.
I've been working. So it's not like I enjoy going clubbing, but the reality is I've heard a lot of Nigerian music.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of it. So that
means in clubs it rings out.
So that means that there's a lot of uncollected revenue sitting here, right? And because a lot of people are either not registering in COSON or not registering anywhere else at all, that money is just going to get stuck here, and I think there's a duration where it's gone.
Yeah. Well, technically, legally, prescription is 3 years, but I think on a practical level, sometimes I think there's a 5-year period in some places, depending on the type of revenue. For instance, I know organizations that have never prescribed any amounts of money for over 4 or 5 years now. And the issue though is you might lose money.
Yeah.
That's a reality.
Yeah.
Because at some point that money is gonna prescribe.
Yeah.
And when it does prescribe, if no one knows.
When you say prescribe, so that they know. Prescribe is when
your claim to it no longer
exists. Yeah.
It no longer becomes your money now.
Yeah.
It becomes everybody else's who partook in the economy's money.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it gets the
general rule of thumb, and then
it gets redistributed amongst everybody else.
Yeah.
So there's that. Though I do see one of my biggest pet peeves, particularly when it comes to making function, is the way in which we always look at our problems from a unilateral perspective. And that for me is like one of the most ridiculous ways you can. There's nothing as complex as a CMO function, an African CMO's functionality in the current environment. Nothing more complex than that. And the issues are multifaceted such that you cannot fix one. But what happens is, instead of taking up the challenge, most creatives decide, you know what, I'm going to buy what the Europeans are selling me. And then they port and become members of European CMOs, which to me is one, the most unpatriotic thing you could do. Two, it's a disservice to yourself and a disservice to your community. It's a disservice to your country. Because in as much as you will get some money, and I think structuring business, let me just premise this with saying, structuring your business in the most financially viable way possible is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. So if you realize, for instance, you're a South African, and you realize you are really big in Nigeria, it's easier for you to join a Nigerian CMO and a South African CMO. Be a member of both, sit in those countries and collect your money quicker.
And more direct.
Yeah. That's a viable thing to do. But what most of our composers, and I'll use artists generally to say artists, anybody who creates art in our environment, do is they'll leave a COSON and go directly to PRS. Leave a COSON, go to SACEM. For me, that is the wrong way to do it. And then I'll tell you why. Because one, let's use somebody, we'll use one of your clients so that it doesn't seem like we're targeting people. So
we're not saying you did it. I don't know who is going to call yet. I'm not saying I have like 9 of them, so I don't know which one.
Okay. Yeah. So let's say Waje, right? Waje's voice within the Nigerian community is louder than it would be within the UK community, right?
Yeah.
That's a fair statement to say, right? So now, if Waje, as a big Nigerian composer and songwriter, feels there are things that need to change within the COSON or MCSN structures, her voice is louder if she's a member. Her voice is louder and more audible if she goes and says, fix X, Y, and Z. Rather than her saying, you know what, it's not getting fixed, so I'm leaving. I'm going to block my royalties or my membership and go hang it in one of the European societies. Because what that does is, make no mistake, right now, in as much as everybody's focusing on Afro beats, the business side of the music is also focusing on the continent.
Yeah.
And they're looking at it as a way in which they can amass wealth.
Yeah.
And we have problems. We have problems. Like you could name them. Only 36% of all broadcasters on the continent are licensed. And we're not talking about which ones are under licensed. And the number grows. So there's huge problems. There's not enough CMOs on the continent that distribute royalties regularly. There's not enough of them that have good governance structures. There's not enough of them that have rules that people understand, right? Just a few weeks ago in SA, we had a huge hullabaloo about distribution rules for one of the CMOs here. But be that as it may,
we can't keep running away from
the fix is in the members themselves.
Yeah.
The